China is hiding places so extreme, so impossible looking, that scientists have literally debated whether they're real. One location has a surface temperature hot enough to cook meat directly on the ground. Another holds over 100,000 carved figures, commissioned by history's only female emperor, and she put her own face on the most powerful one. But the place that has geologists completely stumped is a mountain range that looks like it's actively on fire, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, and according to locals, it has been burning since before recorded history. Join us and let's discover the most insane, jaw-dropping, and genuinely shocking places hidden across China. Let's go!
Number 13. Wuling Yuan Scenic Area. Picture 3,000 sandstone pillars shooting straight up from the ground like needles stabbing the sky. That's Wuling Yuan, tucked inside Zhangjiajie National Forest Park in Hunan Province, and it is one of the most visually violent landscapes on planet Earth. These pillars aren't small. We're talking columns of rock that reach over 200 meters tall. That's taller than a 60-story skyscraper, balanced on bases so narrow they look structurally impossible. Geologists say the formation took roughly 380 million years of erosion to carve. That number is so large it's almost meaningless. So here's what that actually looks like. While dinosaurs were still walking the earth, this process had barely even started. When you stand between these columns, you feel it physically. The scale crushes your sense of proportion. Your brain cannot find a reference point. The fog that rolls through the valleys every morning turns the whole area into a floating dreamscape, which is exactly why James Cameron's team visited it before designing the floating mountains in Avatar. Yes, those alien rock formations from the movie, inspired directly by Wuling Yuan. The park covers over 26,000 acres, contains more than 3,000 individual pillars, and hides 40 caves, 2 natural bridges, and a river system that geologists are still actively mapping. Cable cars carry visitors up the cliff faces, but even from that height, the pillars keep going. Looking down into the valleys is like staring into an ancient world that never quite ended. Wuling Yuan is not a tourist destination. It is a geological event that is still happening in slow motion, and humans just happen to show up during it.
Number 12. Zhangye Dansha Landform. Most people assume mountains are gray, brown, or green. Zhangye Dansha in Gansu Province will permanently break that assumption. These mountains are red, orange, yellow, violet, and deep burgundy, layered in horizontal bands so precise and vivid they look like someone hand-painted them with a brush the size of a football field. The colors aren't paint. They're the result of 24 million years of red sandstone and mineral deposits being compressed, tilted, and slowly exposed by erosion. Iron oxide created the reds and oranges. Chloride produced the greens. Manganese gave the mountains their purple tones. The entire palette is geological chemistry on a scale that defies imagination. The landform stretches across roughly 510 square kilometers, an area larger than the entire city of Chicago. During golden hour, right before sunset, the colors intensify to a degree that makes photographs look fake. Tour groups have literally argued with each other about whether their photos had been filtered. They hadn't. Chinese officials protected the area as a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 2009, and visitation numbers have tripled since then. Narrow boardwalks guide visitors along ridgelines, and at certain viewpoints, you can see 5 distinct color bands within a single hillside. Scientists say the specific combination of minerals, climate, and tectonic activity that created Zhangye Dansha is almost certainly unique on Earth. You cannot find another place that looks exactly like this anywhere else on the planet. That's not tourism marketing, that's geology.
Number 11. Longji Rice Terraces. The Longji Rice Terraces in Guangxi Province were not built, they were carved by hand. Over 650 years, beginning in the Yuan dynasty around 1300 CE, the Zhuang and Yao minority peoples cut into the steep slopes of the Dragon's Backbone Mountain, layer by layer, creating a cascading staircase of flooded fields that now climbs from 300 to 1100 meters above sea level. That elevation range, top to bottom, is taller than the Empire State Building stacked 3 times over. The terraces cover an area of roughly 66 square kilometers and contain thousands of individual paddy fields. The engineering required to make this work with zero modern equipment is still studied by agricultural scholars. Water flows downhill from field to field through a network of channels and bamboo pipes that the original builders calculated by hand centuries ago, and that system still functions today. What makes Longji visually devastating is what happens to those flooded fields in different seasons. In spring, when the paddies are filled with water before planting, the entire mountain becomes a mirror. Every terrace reflects the sky, and the hillside transforms into a cascading waterfall of reflected clouds.
In autumn, the ripe rice turns the mountain gold. In winter, snow settles on the ridges, and the stepped landscape looks like a giant architectural drawing. 4 distinct minority villages sit within the terrace system, and their residents still farm these fields by hand, using methods almost identical to those used 650 years ago. Longji is the longest ongoing land engineering project in Chinese history.
Number 10. Yuyang Hani Rice Terraces. 1,000 miles southwest of Longji, in Yunnan province near the border of Vietnam, the Hani people built something even more extreme. The Yuyang Hani Rice Terraces cover over 16,000 acres across the steep slopes of the Alao Mountains, reaching altitudes of 2,000 meters. They were constructed over 1,300 years, a project that began before the Magna Carta was signed and was still being expanded when Columbus reached the Americas. To understand the scale, the terraces contain more individual paddy fields than the entire state of Vermont has farms. The Hani developed an irrigation system that pulls water down from the forested mountain peaks through a network of gravity-fed channels and distributes it across every single terrace level. The forest at the top is protected by the Hani as sacred, not for spiritual reasons alone, but because they understood that without those trees holding water in the soil, the entire system below collapses. That is sustainable engineering from the 7th century. What makes Yuyang globally famous are the sunrise photographs. When morning light hits thousands of flooded terraces simultaneously, each one reflecting a slightly different angle of sky, the entire mountainside becomes a fractured mosaic of gold, pink, and blue. It looks computer-generated. UNESCO recognized it as a World Heritage Site in 2013, specifically citing the living cultural landscape, meaning the people, the land, and the water system are all considered part of the same protected monument. The Hani didn't just farm a mountain, they redesigned an entire ecosystem.
Number 9. Juzaigo Valley. Juzaigo Valley in Sichuan province contains lakes so blue, so turquoise, so impossibly clear that visitors regularly report feeling dizzy the first time they see them. The watercolors range from deep sapphire to milky jade to electric turquoise, sometimes within the same lake, shifting gradually as the depth and mineral content changes beneath the surface. The science behind it? The water is extremely cold and saturated with calcium carbonate. This combination reflects light in a way that absorbs red wavelengths and bounces back blues and greens with unusual intensity. The result is water that looks like someone poured liquid gemstone into the valley floor. The valley stretches over 72,000 hectares inside a UNESCO World Heritage Site at altitudes between 2,000 and 4,500 meters. It contains 114 lakes, 17 waterfalls, and 11 distinct forest zones, many of which change color simultaneously during autumn. In October, the tree reflections in those mineral-rich lakes create double images so perfect and still that photographs taken there look like oil paintings. The entire valley nearly disappeared in 2017 when a magnitude 7.0 earthquake struck the region, partially draining several lakes, collapsing 2 waterfalls, and destroying most of the tourist infrastructure. Recovery efforts took years, and some features will never fully return to their pre-earthquake form. The earthquake itself altered the underground aquifer systems that feed the lakes. Juzaigo survived, but it is a different valley now. Scientists are still studying exactly how the earthquake changed the water chemistry. What they found surprised them.
Number 8. Huanglong Scenic Area. 40 kilometers from Juzaigo, Huanglong sits at nearly 3,600 meters above sea level, high enough that the air pressure is roughly 65% of what you'd breathe at sea level, and most visitors need supplemental oxygen just to walk the trails. But the people who make that climb see something that has no real parallel anywhere on Earth. Huanglong's valley floor is covered in over 3,400 travertine pools, naturally formed by calcium carbonate-rich water flowing down the mountain and depositing mineral layers that slowly build up into curved terrace dams. The pools hold still, shallow water that takes on colors ranging from pale yellow to vivid turquoise to deep emerald, depending on the season and depth. The yellow mineral deposits covering the valley gave Huanglong its name, which translates to yellow dragon. From the air, the cascading pools do look like the scales of a massive creature flowing downhill through the forest. The main scenic corridor stretches 3.6 kilometers, but the scale is deceptive. Walking the full trail at altitude with proper stops takes most visitors 4 to 5 hours. The area receives significant snowfall in winter, and in those months the pools partially freeze, creating a landscape where blue and green water sits surrounded by white ice and evergreen forest simultaneously.
Huanglong was added to the UNESCO World Heritage List in 1992, and visitation is strictly controlled because the travertine pool formations are extraordinarily fragile. A footprint left in the wrong place can damage formations that took thousands of years to develop.
Number 7. Leshan Giant Buddha. In 713 CE, a Buddhist monk named Haitong began an impossible project. He wanted to carve a Buddha directly into the cliff face where the Minjiang, Dadu, and Qingyi rivers converge in Sichuan province. His reasoning was both spiritual and practical. The turbulent waters at the river junction were killing boatmen regularly, and Haitong believed a giant Buddha would calm the waters through divine intervention. Construction took 90 years and outlasted Haitong himself, who died before it was completed. The result is the Leshan Giant Buddha. At 71 meters tall, it remains the largest stone Buddha ever carved. To grasp that number, the statue is taller than the Statue of Liberty from foot to torch. Its shoulders are 28 meters wide. Each ear is 7 meters long. That's the height of a 2-story building. 1,100 individual stone drainage channels are built into the statue's hair, collar, and chest, invisible from the front, that quietly wick away rainwater to prevent erosion. The engineering is so effective that the drainage system has worked continuously for over 1,300 years. Here's the disturbing twist about Haitong's plan to calm the waters. It actually worked. When massive amounts of rock debris from the carving process were deposited into the river, they inadvertently changed the riverbed's profile and reduced the dangerous currents. A monk accidentally solved a hydraulic engineering problem by carving a prayer into a cliff. The Buddha sits above the water still, looking downstream at the same junction where boatmen were dying 14 centuries ago.
Number 6. Longmen Grottos. 40 kilometers south of Luoyang in Henan province, an army waits in stone. Along a 1-kilometer stretch of cliff face bordering the Yi River, 2,345 individual caves and niches hold over 100,000 Buddhist statues, ranging from 2 centimeters tall to over 17 meters high. The carving began in 493 CE during the Northern Wei dynasty and continued for roughly 400 years, with different emperors and dynasties adding new caves and figures. The largest chamber, Fengshan Temple, contains the Vairocana Buddha, 17.14 meters tall, carved directly from the cliff, with a face of such serene authority that it has been photographed millions of times and still manages to look different in every light condition. The face is believed by scholars to have been modeled after Wu Zetian, China's only female emperor, who reportedly donated her personal cosmetics budget to fund the final stages of construction. Wu Zetian was arguably the most powerful person on earth during her reign, and she embedded her own face into the most sacred Buddhist site in China as a theological and political statement. I am the living embodiment of the Buddha. That's not a small claim. Thousands of the smaller statues have been deliberately defaced, heads removed, faces destroyed, during various periods of religious persecution and wartime looting. Many of those heads now sit in museums in Europe and the United States, removed by Western collectors in the early 20th century. The Chinese government is actively pursuing their return. Longmen is a war wound carved in limestone, still open after 1,500 years.
Number 5. Flaming Mountains of Turpan. Here's a fact that sounds made up. There is a mountain range in China where the ground temperature regularly hits 80 degrees Celsius in summer. That's 176 degrees Fahrenheit. That is hot enough to cook an egg directly on the surface. The Flaming Mountains of Turpan in Xinjiang sit in the middle of the Turpan Depression, one of the lowest and hottest basins on Earth, where summertime air temperatures already exceed 47 degrees Celsius in the shade. The mountains are formed from red sandstone that contains high concentrations of iron oxide, the same compound that makes Mars look red. Under direct sunlight, those iron minerals absorb and radiate heat with brutal efficiency, creating a shimmer effect that makes the entire range appear to be actively burning. The mountains stretch 100 kilometers east to west, rising to peaks of 831 meters, and support essentially zero vegetation. Nothing grows there. The heat is too extreme, the soil too mineral heavy, the water too scarce. In the most visited section near the city of Turpan, a large thermometer monument records real-time ground temperatures for tourists. A reading of 75 to 80 degrees Celsius is routine in July and August. The Uyghur people who have lived in the Turpan region for centuries built an underground irrigation system called the Kurez, which channels glacial meltwater from the Tian Shan Mountains through tunnels below the desert floor, keeping it cool and preventing evaporation. Without that system, no agriculture exists within 50 kilometers of the Flaming Mountains. The mountains don't just look deadly, they are.
Number 4. Jiangxijie Glass Bridge. In 2016, engineers completed a construction project in Hunan province that immediately became the most terrifying bridge on Earth. The Zhangjiajie Grand Canyon Glass Bridge stretches 430 meters across a canyon at a height of 300 meters above the valley floor. Every single surface of the bridge deck, the entire walkway you stand on, is made of 99 layers of tempered glass. You can see straight down 300 meters through your feet the entire crossing. For comparison, 300 meters is roughly the height of the Eiffel Tower. You are standing on glass at Eiffel Tower height, looking straight down. The bridge was designed to hold 800 people simultaneously. It was tested before opening by having workers smash it with sledgehammers. The glass did not break. On its first day of operation, so many people tried to cross it that organizers had to implement a strict lottery reservation system. The bridge became so overcrowded so quickly that it was temporarily closed just 13 days after opening to manage the safety protocols. Engineers then redesigned the entire visitor management system before reopening. The glass panels are each roughly 12 centimeters thick and weigh approximately 500 kilograms each. A total of 99 such panels make up the walkway. Every panel is individually bolted, monitored for stress fractures, and routinely inspected. Despite all of this engineering confidence, a 2021 incident where winds cracked one panel without causing it to fall or fail catastrophically made global news and temporarily spiked visitor numbers even higher. People specifically came to walk the bridge because it had cracked. That is the psychology of extreme tourism.
Number 3. Heaven's Gate Mountain. Deep inside Tianmen Mountain in Hunan Province, at an elevation of 1,518 meters, there is a hole in a mountain. Not a cave, not a tunnel, a naturally formed arch, 131 meters tall and 57 meters wide, punching straight through the solid rock face of the peak. It is the largest naturally occurring mountain arch in the world. The Chinese call it Tianmen, Heaven's Gate. The arch was formed over millions of years by water erosion, working along a fracture line in the limestone. What remains is a window through solid rock, large enough to fly a military jet through, which the Chinese Air Force actually did during a 1999 demonstration, threading a fighter aircraft through the opening at high speed. Getting to Tianmen involves a cable car ride that is itself a psychological event. The Tianmen Mountain Cable Car is 7.5 kilometers long, the longest high-altitude cable car in the world, rising from the city of Zhangjiajie through steep cliff faces, dense cloud cover, and dramatic elevation changes that take roughly 30 minutes to complete. At the top, a staircase of 999 steps climbs the cliff face directly to the arch.
Number 2. Zhangdong Cliff Village. This one is not a natural wonder. This one is a human decision that most people would classify as insane. Zhangdong Village in Guizhou Province was built inside a single massive cave. Not near a cave, inside one. For generations, hundreds of residents lived their entire lives within the shelter of a natural cavern large enough to contain an entire village, including homes, a school, farmland, livestock pens, and a basketball court. The cave opening faces a cliff drop of several hundred meters. The interior is roughly 230 meters wide, 150 meters deep, and 50 meters tall at its highest point. Weather inside is stable year-round. No direct rain, no harsh wind. Temperature variations are minimal. For poor farming communities in remote Guizhou with no access to construction materials, this was not a bizarre choice. It was an efficient one. The Chinese government eventually relocated most residents to modern housing in the valley below, citing concerns about healthcare access, education quality, and infrastructure limitations. Many residents resisted. Some refused to leave entirely. When journalists visited after the official relocation, they found elderly holdouts still living inside the cave, farming the interior plots by hand, unwilling to abandon a home their families had occupied for generations. The school that once operated inside Zhangdong educated children who had never seen rain fall on open ground. The cave was their entire sky. And when officials finally shuttered that school and brought the children to modern classrooms in the valley, several of them had panic attacks from the sudden exposure to open sky. That detail is in the official records.
Number 1. Mausoleum of the First Qin Emperor. Here is the most disturbing fact in Chinese archaeology. The largest tomb ever built is sitting right there beneath a grass-covered hill in Shanxi Province, fully mapped by radar, and no one has opened it in 2,200 years. Not because they can't, because they're afraid of what's still active inside. Qin Shi Huang, China's first emperor, was buried inside a subterranean palace covering 98 square kilometers, roughly the size of Manhattan, underground. Built by 700,000 workers over 38 years. Ancient records describe mechanical crossbows positioned at every entrance, still loaded, rigged to fire automatically at any intruder, motion triggered. And then there are the rivers, not water,
but liquid mercury, engineered to flow continuously through channels representing the Yangtze and Yellow rivers. Scientists didn't believe it. Then they tested the soil above the tomb. Mercury concentrations were hundreds of times above natural levels. The rivers are real. The air inside the central chamber may be lethally saturated with mercury vapor. Chinese authorities have officially decided not to excavate. The technology to do it safely doesn't exist yet. The terracotta army of 8,000 warriors found in 1974, that was just the outer pit, a warm-up act. The actual tomb has never been touched. An emperor who burned books and buried scholars alive is still in there, sealed, booby-trapped, and poisoned, and the door is still closed.
If you thought this was terrifying, you are not ready for what they found in the video on your screen. Click it right now. The truth is worse than you think.